I've been meaning to jump on here for a long time and talk about multiple topics, but one that I've been holding on to, which you've probably heard me in the past if you've listened to my podcast, is that I wanted to share about my experience on Vipassana meditation. Now, some of you might listen to this and go, oh my gosh, you're like the 10th person that's mentioned Vipassana to me in the last 2 months. And this might be your sign that it is time to take the leap and go and find out about this Vipassana experience. So what is Vipassana? It is a type of meditation. And I do just want to say that I'm simply sharing my experience with you. Everybody will have a very different experience of anything and everything in life. However, I do find that I'm often speaking about snippets of Vipassana meditation to my groups. And I don't actually practice it anymore. And I will talk about that. But I have got a client who is off on a Vipassana course at the moment. And so it's always pretty exciting. And I hear my words when I want to say, I hope you have a good experience. But the thing is, with anything, your experience is going to be what it is, and it's not going to be like mine. And I just wanted to share what Vipassana has meant to me. But please remember that this is solely my experience. Some people have not had good experiences. Some people have had life-changing experiences. It is all very different. And I encourage you that if you feel safe and if you feel ready, go and find out for yourself what it is for you. So my journey with Vipassana meditation started back in 2012. So I had recently met Gavin, who is now my husband, and he had sat many Vipassana meditations. And he didn't really say much. He is more of the mystique. He doesn't give a lot of information. And I was always just willing to try new things out. So he said, oh, do you want to do a Vipassana meditation course? There's one in Melbourne. We were living in Brisbane, or he was coming and visiting whilst I was living in Brisbane. And I said, yeah, cool. Sounds good. Now, this is when I was an osteopath. I was seeing many clients in a week. I was very busy. I was talking to them all the time. I really enjoyed that stage of my life. I couldn't imagine seeing that many clients anymore. Like sometimes it would get up to 60, 70 clients a week, but I loved it and I was capable of doing it. And he said, it's this 10-day meditation course. And actually, I wanted to mention course because a lot of people will talk about meditation retreats. And it gets explained really well on the course, but it is work. You are there to work on yourself. It's not physical work, it is the mental work. But it is a course to learn this style of meditation known as Vipassana. And I'm not necessarily going to get into the history of it because that gets a little bit muddled in my brain. It's just talking about my experience and how I got introduced to it, which I always love speaking to the people there once you're allowed to speak and find out how do they come across Vipassana. So he told me about this Vipassana course. It was in Melbourne and, am I keen to give it a go? Sure, let's give it a go. And I'm actually really grateful that I didn't have too much information. And of course, I don't want to divulge a whole heap because this could scare some of you off. But I got there and you're not allowed your phone, you're not allowed any books, you're not allowed any pen and paper. You are there solely to work on yourself and learn to meditate. And I am someone who loves to eat all the time. And I found out that you are only allowed 2 meals a day. Your last meal is at 11 a.m. It is different if you're new. You're allowed a piece of fruit at 5 p.m. But once you return, that 5 p.m. just becomes lemon water. And I was like, oh my gosh. And you're not allowed to talk. You are not allowed to communicate. So communication is not just talking. It is no eye contact with people. And it is funny how people still communicate. still have that people pleaser element in them. They still open doors for you. It's like, I don't want you to open the door for me. You might be there with 60 or 100 people, but you are meant to be there completely on your own. So I was kind of grateful that he didn't tell me much information, because I probably would have talked myself out of it. What? I can finish eating at 11 a.m. I'm going to die from starvation. And the talking part, I wasn't too fussed about that. Even though I love talking to my clients, my gosh, being dropped into 10/11 days of no speaking was really amazing. Now, one thing that annoys me, and if I am to do another Vipassana, which I am sort of feeling called to, one thing that's annoyed me is that I've always had one of the helpers speak to me. Now, everybody who works at the Vipassana Center, and I'm going to explain this, have sat Vipassana before. And I'll add to this, because I'll talk about it in a minute, is that I have sat 2 Vipassana courses whilst I was pregnant, which I credit a lot to the outcome around my pregnancy and birth of Violet, who's now 7.5. But yeah, I know that if I'm going to go sit a future Vipassana, I'm going to write down on my sheet, please do not talk to me under any circumstances. And they would ask me questions, checking if I was okay, but in a way that I felt like I really had to respond. And I'm like, damn it, I just want to get through a Vipassana. I've taken 11 days out of my life, and I do not want to speak to anyone. So if you are ever a Vipassana volunteer, maybe keep this in mind. Yeah, so I went along and all of a sudden was dropped into its 10/11 days of not speaking. And it was amazing. And this was at a time where I was going through my health crisis of my skin exploding in cystic acne. If you've listened to my pain story, it's right at the start, and having rashes and having joint pains and really not knowing what was going on with my body. And I remember going into it thinking, well, if all I have to do is meditate for 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night, I'll do that if it's going to fix my skin. And I remember not wanting to look in the mirror for those 10 days. And over that period of time, my perspective really did change about my skin. And it was a pretty, it was a pretty amazing experience. There are so many things that are coming to me as I'm speaking about it. Because I did feel different about my skin. And then, of course, this work is about integrating it into daily life. So meditation was unfortunately not the solution to my skin. It did shift my mindset around it for a period of time. If you've been following my work, it's definitely been more about the emotional and expressing myself, which is very much what I do now. And I don't have the level of skin issues that I used to over a decade ago. But we would learn about the meditation. That's what I probably won't go into details in. I think go and find out for yourself. But I really feel like there are so many benefits to being dropped into 10 days of immersive learning, because I have never experienced meditation like that when I've gone and done a weekly class or just meditated with someone. And I know Gav takes maybe like 5 or 6 days before music gets out of his head. So he was a musician, is a musician, and he would have all these earworms, all this music running through his head. I do not hear music, but it took about 4 days for me to drop into it and just go, oh my gosh, I feel different, and I'm taking this on board. And when I was pregnant, I sat a 3-day Vipassana. And you can do that after you've sat the initial 10 days, but I didn't feel like it had the same impact or same results, and results are just, tied with expectations, but it felt so different. So I've done a few 10-day ones and one 3-day, and by far it's the 10-day ones that I get the most profound shifts. So I remember just getting a total different body awareness. Now, I was trained as an osteopath, and I'd have a lot of people work on me at uni, and a lot of experienced osteopaths work on me and tell me how my left sacroiliac joint was stuck or it was too mobile. And I was like, what are you guys full of? I don't feel it. I don't have any issues around it. And then sure enough, down the track, I started to get issues with it. And I remember during one of the meditation sits, there are a few compulsory sits, but then there are many, many other hours of meditation. But I remember sitting through one of these, and when I stood up, my left SIJ cracked. And it felt, and I had a history of plantar fasciitis in my left foot and some biomechanical problems. And I remember feeling this crack in my left SI joint. And then it was like dominoes just fell into place through my hip, through my knee, into my foot. And then all of a sudden it was in better alignment. So it was really interesting what came out of just that 1 hour sit, but also all of the many hours of sitting for the days prior. And I would enjoy speaking to people at the end of the course. And I heard many fascinating stories from people who had, had their therapist for many years, and they always had this pain in their head, like a headache, and their chiropractor would always crack their middle back and their headache would come back. And that during a meditation sit, they would get up and they would hear a loud bang somewhere in their body. And again, like that domino effect, and then the headaches were gone. So there was so much learning in just sitting with things rather than reacting to it. And this is my interpretation of Vipassana, is that it was very much focused on sensation. Everything is sensation. Pain is sensation. Now, bringing in my work, I believe that pain sensation has a lot to do with emotions. And there are parts of Vipassana that I resonate with, and there are some hardcore Vipassana practice people out there and it works for them. Like, I'm all for choose what works for you. And, as I said, I no longer practice. I probably kept it up for a few years, and then up until Violet was 6 months old. And then it just didn't resonate with me anymore. But I still think it's an amazing practice, and I still recommend people give it a go and explore for themselves. And I've had many osteo clients, and now these emotional release clients go and sit Vipassana as well and have some pretty profound stories. So yeah, it was just amazing to sit with and not react to any sensation, be it painful, and really see that it does pass over time. And this is something that I see in people just day to day, having been an osteopath and doing the work that I do, is that we get very much into reactive mode, where we feel something and we want to go and do something to fix it, rather than just sitting with it. Now, I think there is a time and place for treatment for sure, but I am not someone historically who has actually engaged in a lot of treatment. I have definitely sprained joints and sprained ribs, which are quite painful, but I know that if I just sit with it a lot of the time, and part of it is because I know when I've done something more severe, like broken my ankle, but if I sit with it and not irritate it, it will actually just go away. So what else about my experience of Vipassana? Because this was many years ago, and the last one was 7.5 years ago, just before Violet was born, is that I realized that I really did have quite a few answers within myself, because I would have these questions pop up and I would observe them, and then maybe a few days later the answer would come, rather than asking a friend or even asking a coach, which I do use a lot of coaches now, and having their input versus what really felt intuitively aligned for me. So I'm going to just dive into a different topic around Vipassana. Is I know that I've had friends who are like, there's no way I could do it. I couldn't finish my last meal at 11 a.m. I'd get so hungry. I'm like, that's just an excuse. You'll be fine. You are not expending much energy at all. You are not exercising or anything like that. So there's no reason for you to actually consume that much. And I also think you realize that the hunger, the grumbling in your stomach, again, is a sensation there to be observed. So there are some people who are going to immediately react to that hunger feeling. And that's where we have people who have got emotional eating issues going on. Because rather than sitting with that discomfort, that emotion coming up, that therefore sensation, they're stuffing it down because it's too uncomfortable to sit with. So it really is working on yourself and learning a technique and implementing it and repeating it and learning lessons as you go along. But just be aware of the excuses that you might be coming up with. Oh, I can't take 10 days off. I couldn't leave my family. And I know I've worked with clients through these blocks, and it's, for the clients I've worked with, it's been one of the best experiences and most pivotal experiences that they've had in their life. And I would probably say the same for me. Experiencing Vipassana was a pretty pivotal experience and very eye-opening for me. What else? It's like, oh, I couldn't sleep in rooms with other people. Now, depending on what centers you go to, you might be in a dorm with other people, but you can't talk to them, or you might have your individual rooms. And actually, that's something that I really wanted to mention about Vipassana, because a lot of people think meditation retreat. Now it's a course, but they think meditation retreat, this is going to cost me thousands of dollars. You know, all my food's catered for, it's vegetarian, and all the facilities and my accommodation. But one of the most incredible things is that there are hundreds of centres all around the world. I know that every state in Australia has a Vipassana centre. There's accommodation, there's grounds, there's a meditation room where everyone goes into, there is eating quarters, and it is all built on donation. Now, if you cannot afford to go apart from getting yourself there, and I trust that there's always a way to get yourself there, and a space will always open up if it's meant to be, is if you cannot afford it, you don't, and they don't monitor who pays or not. You don't have to pay. I think they give you like a minimum that would cover, but again, if you're not able to, you don't have to. Some people go back and serve, so they become the people who cook the meals or tidy up or whatever role they're doing to give back. But I think it's pretty incredible that there are hundreds of centres around the world in many, many different countries. There's one in every state in Australia. There's one in New Zealand as well, up the North Island. And they have all been built on donation. I believe there's people that probably give tens of thousands of dollars, and there's some people that don't give anything at all. But they are actually beautiful and basic centres. All your needs are met, things are clean, the food is incredible. The food is incredible in the sense that you're not distracted. You can't be scrolling on your phone. You're not talking to people. You have plenty of time to digest. The food is prepped by people who have sat Vipassana courses. So I believe it is infused with a different energy. The meditation space is just used for meditation. It doesn't get rented out for anything else. It's pretty incredible. And the nature, the animals, because you don't disturb and interact with them, they come so close to you, they never get interfered with. So it's a pretty powerful energy. And just on the eating thing is, I learned my lesson when I did the 3-day. And so I did a 3-day and a 10-day Vipassana when I was pregnant. And yeah, this is going to lead into the pregnancy story, is that Gav and I guess we had discussions around a very conscious conception. Violet was not unplanned. She was very planned. And we came to the decision that we would both sit a Vipassana course before we tried to conceive her, because how amazing would it be to give her all of that energy? So I'm really big on preconception, mental, emotional, physical health. So we went to sit a Vipassana, but what came out of it was, I have a lot of issues in my body. I was having a lot of gut problems. I was having the skin breakouts. I was having the rashes, but I was back in New Zealand by this time, so my skin had settled down. But the answers I got was, I need to work on myself, especially when I had to work on my gut health and my skin. And I wanted to take very much more of a natural route, is that I often say to people with emotional work and everything, it's easier to do the work before you have babies, especially if you're thinking about having multiple babies. There are so many herbs that you cannot take. Dietary restrictions may not be recommended because you're pregnant and then you're breastfeeding, and then maybe you're going to be in preconception care, and then you're going to get pregnant again, maybe breastfeeding. And you can imagine if you have a few kids, they can go on for 10 or more years, depending on what sort of spacing you have between them. So I was like, right, I do want to have this baby, but it's not right to do it after this meditation. I actually need to invest the time in myself and my health. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because I took some of the nastiest herbs that there is no way I would take if I was pregnant or breastfeeding. And I was able to clear a lot of my gut issues, significantly my skin. If you've been following my work, a lot of my skin stuff, again, was about stepping into who I really am and expressing that. But I had to do that work, and I believe that it set Violet up for a healthier entrance into the world. So we didn't actually conceive straight after that round of Vipassana. And I think it happened about 6 months later. I got pregnant very easily, had a pretty amazing pregnancy. I had a few little niggles, but nothing major. And yeah, then decided that due to my experience with Vipassana, I really wanted to sit it a couple of times during pregnancy. Now, for the friends who said, oh, I couldn't do Vipassana because I couldn't eat. When you're pregnant, you're allowed to eat whenever you want. But I learned some hard lessons, because that's when I went on the 3-day one in Tasmania. And the food is really amazing. And I just ate so much food, but then I was so uncomfortable. And this was a sensation that I had to sit with. I was so uncomfortable that I just really struggled with the meditation. But that's not a bad thing. That is the experience that I had, and that's for me to observe. But that was also the 3-day where I felt like this isn't long enough for me to drop into it. It's not long enough for my ceiling fan in my brain to wind down after I've turned off the switch. So I learned from that experience. And yes, you can eat whenever you want when you're pregnant, but I did it differently the next time. And so at 36 weeks, I decided to sit another 10-day Vipassana. And this one was in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure. So it would have been back in 2014, or maybe it was in Melbourne. I can't remember. Is that I wanted to sit a 10-day whilst I was pregnant. And I do believe I was very in tune during the pregnancy, but this allowed me to take it a level deeper. No distractions, nothing to focus on except for myself and the sensations that Violet was giving me moving around in my belly. Now, I always had a thought that she was going to be born at 38 weeks. And this is another story that I want to share in another podcast, my birth story, before it exits my mind 7.5 years later. But I always thought that she was going to be born at 38 weeks. So actually, I was in Melbourne because we had her in Melbourne. We both went and sat a 10-day meditation course and Vipassana. And they often recommend that you don't do it with a friend or a partner, because you may not be able to help yourself communicating with one another. And so Gav and I have always really had to say, look, we actually don't want to communicate with one another, but this is way more convenient if we can do it together. We're about to have a baby. These are the reasons. And the next opportunity might not be for a long time. So they let us sit it together. We're not interested in trying to sneak off or communicate with one another from opposite sides of the room. That would defeat the purpose. I'm there for 10 days. I'm going to make the most of it. So it was an amazing experience to do Vipassana for me whilst I was pregnant. It really helped me get in tune with my body and baby on another level. And there was another pregnant lady there as well. And so happened that we had the same, her primary midwife was my backup midwife, and we were due around the same time. I was like, don't worry, I think I'm going to have Violet a couple of weeks early anyway. And I jumping forward, having done Vipassana and having a home birth experience with Violet, I had a really positive experience. So throughout this couple of years, I was pretty good at practicing the Vipassana meditation an hour in the morning and an hour at night, so 2 hours a day, and going through that process. And I would drop off every now and then, and that was all good. But I was practicing like right into when I was in labor, and I had a 2-hour labor with Violet. And there was definitely a point where it's like, right, this is getting pretty intense, but I never felt it was painful. So I do tell people I was able to have a painless birth. And this was something that I really wondered if it was just something that people talked about. Was it possible? I did a friend's physio study, and I was the outlier at the bottom of the scale that had the worst pain threshold, sticking my hand in a bucket of ice. But I say, this is physiological pain. I wanted this baby. I was prepared to go through it, but it never felt like pain as such. And that's one of the biggest things that Vipassana taught me, is that everything is sensation. And I remember saying that to myself, it's just sensation, it's just sensation. So I really credit Vipassana to me having a painless birth, to having a pretty smooth birth, and viewing everything as sensation. And as a result of that, I have had a handful of pregnant clients, especially when I was in the osteo clinic. I would share this experience with them, and they would go off and they would do a Vipassana. I tried a bit of hypnobirthing and I used elements of it, but the Vipassana was the thing that I had practiced for a couple of years beforehand, and it's the thing that came easiest to me. And I think that's sometimes the hard thing with learning how to meditate last minute, is that it's not a default thing. You don't do it when you're stressed. And birth is a physiological stress on the body, as is pregnancy. So I've had a number of pregnant clients do this, and some of them have not had their expected births, but really credit also their experience of Vipassana to help them move through this experience, which was really beautiful. So I'll share Violet's birth story in another podcast episode. I've got so much pregnancy stuff that I could share that I would love to share, but for some reason it's not downloading immediately for me. But yeah, this was my experience of Vipassana. Is I learned that I wasn't going to starve to death if I had my last meal at 11 a.m. That so many answers came to me whilst I was in that longer period, repeated, day after day of learning meditation. I became so much more aware of my body. I remember thinking, gosh, if everyone just meditated, the world would be a better place, because we would also be able to think on whether or not we react to situations or whether or not we respond to them, and give them a little bit more space and time. I'll add to that around the body awareness and pain, is that there are some people who go there with some pretty significant disease states, which I would imagine would be quite uncomfortable. Everyone goes for a different situation in their life, or just because they've heard about it and they're curious to try it. And I've seen some people sit in positions that you think, how do they do that if their body is riddled with this disease state? So it's pretty powerful. Not that I'm looking at people during the 10 days, but afterwards, the people that you do just end up connecting with, if you choose to, some of their stories are pretty fascinating. The lives that they used to live, how they got introduced to Vipassana, alcoholism, addiction, and so on. So it's actually I kept up the Vipassana at home whilst, up until while it was 6 months pregnant. Gavin and I used to meditate. He continued on for a little bit longer. And then my mind just started going in a different direction. And I also found that I was putting myself under pressure to stick to an hour in the morning and an hour at night. So I guess I was no longer doing Vipassana, but it's like, if I'm not going to do an hour, I won't do any at all. So then I just drop down to doing 5 minutes. And I've tried out different types of meditation. And I don't think meditation is for everyone. I think it's worth giving a go and finding out, but there are so many different styles of meditation out there. And if you're hearing Vipassana, then maybe this is a sign for you to give it a go. They are all around the world. Just look it up, Vipassana. Some people call it Vipassana or Vipassana, whatever you want to. But especially if you're tight on a budget, this is accessible for everyone to go and do. You've just got to get yourself there. And they always have means and ways of getting you there as well, and getting you back home. So there is a lot more to Vipassana meditation. This is my experience. There are some clients that I will not recommend it to, or they've got to make their own decision, really. But some people who have got severe mental health instability, I definitely know a handful of people who don't even talk about their Vipassana experience, which gets me very curious, but that's their journey, that's their story. But if you're not sure, you just need to go and find out, go and, ask some questions. One thing that helped me, but this is my personality, is not knowing very much about it. Being thrown into 10 days of silence, 11 days of silence, and having my last meal at 11 a.m. Those were my main concerns, but they weren't concerns at the end of the day. So be aware of the stories that you might be making up. You could have a pretty profound shift. Every experience that I've had is different. Gav has sat many, many Vipassana courses. I remember him saying, like, the first one, he could barely sit still, and he was just like doing laps around the small area that you could walk around, but you're not allowed to run or anything like that. And every experience has been different. So I'm feeling called to, especially now that my client is in the midst of a 10-day Vipassana, and their experience is going to be whatever their experience is. And I look forward to hearing about it, whatever it is, but got to be careful. It's not, I hope you have a good experience. It's anything and everything that comes up. So I am feeling called to maybe go and experience another 10-day Vipassana. All I have to do is make the time. Maybe I'm just putting it out there for a little bit of accountability. If you have sat Vipassana, I would love to hear what your experience is. If you want to message me on Instagram, is probably the easiest place, or send me an email. Do you even talk about the fact that you have been to Vipassana and that you have experienced this or learnt this style of meditation? Do you still resonate with it? And actually, that's one thing that I do talk about in my groups, because what I teach people is to express their emotion, to speak it out loud. And this is something that doesn't sit with me in terms of Vipassana, because it's all about sitting with the emotion, sitting with the sensation that comes up. So again, I still think Vipassana is amazing. And you can take bits and pieces of what you like from any diet, any practice, and leave behind what doesn't work for you. I still think Vipassana is amazing, but as I've gone in to delve into this emotional space and processing emotions, I do think there is a time and place as well for you to express out loud and to be held in that space and feel all the sensation that comes up when you actually express your emotions. So, is there anything else I want to share with you about Vipassana meditation? Not at this stage, but if you were hearing about this and it's been multiple times, maybe go check it out. Sometimes if there's a wait list, you will find that a space will open up for you. If it's meant to be, you will find your way there. And it's very interesting. So I look forward to hearing from you if you have been on Vipassana, if you're going to go on a Vipassana course. The 10 days is what you have to start with. I know that once kids are 7, they can start to be introduced to it. So while it's 7.5, I should probably have a chat to Gav and see if he wants to take her up there, where the one is in New Zealand, and see if she wants to experience it for herself. I'm pretty sure they don't do 10 days with kids. Start small. But yeah, it's been a pretty pivotal experience that I've had multiple times in my life. Every time's different. I credit it towards having a painless birth, but I was practicing it for a couple of years prior. And I know that my pregnant clients have also been able to move through their birth experience, whatever that might be, long labors or whatever, crises sometimes, and have really seen how Vipassana has also benefited them and their journey, whatever that might be. All right, so I'm glad to finally have shared my experience, and I hope to go and sit another course very soon. I hope you're having an amazing week. Bye.